Welcome to Arirang News, and you're tuned in to our ongoing coverage of the recovery efforts to search for survivors of the sunken ferry. It's Friday, April 18th here in Seoul, and I'm Choi Yoo-sun. A major rescue operation continues surrounding the capsized ferry off Korea's southwest on this Friday evening. Divers have finally reached inside the hull of the sunken ship, but there have been conflicting accounts all day about how successful they have been. And for details, we'll go to our Hwang Sang-hee at the Central Disaster Safety Headquarters here in Seoul. Sang-hee, what's the latest?
Well, there have been conflicting reports about whether the rescue team has succeeded in entering the capsized vessel. We are getting reports that around 20 divers have begun to try and enter the third floor of the vessel since about an hour ago. Now, the third floor is where the rooms for passengers are, and this is fueling hopes as the search for survivors continue. The Central Disaster Safety Headquarters said this morning that a group of divers had successfully entered the cafeteria of the capsized vessel. It said the rescue team installed 3 guidelines that could reach the cafeteria and that the divers would begin full-scale rescue operations in the afternoon. But with the Coast Guard hesitating to use the word success on describing their entry, the government later apologized in the afternoon for the confusion it caused through its inaccurate choice of words. Meanwhile, 2 divers from the South Korean Navy entered a compartment on the second floor of the vessel at about 3:30 p.m. Korea time, but withdrew just 14 minutes later after a guideline connected with the vessel's exterior broke. Yoo-sun?
Sang-hee, more than 2 days have now passed since the Sewol-ho ferry capsized, and additional bodies are being recovered at the site, but no news of any more survivors.
That's right. 3 bodies were recovered so far today. The bodies of 2 male students were recovered about 500 meters away from the capsized vessel earlier this afternoon. This comes after the body of a middle-aged man was recovered in the morning, putting the total confirmed death toll at 28. 12 bodies have been confirmed as being high school students, 2 teachers, 3 crew members, and 1 passenger. 10 bodies have yet to be identified, but 7 others are believed to be high schoolers. 268 people still remain missing, and unfortunately, like you said, the number of survivors remains unchanged. Yoo-sun?
All right, thank you for that update, Sang-hee. That was our Hwang Sang-hee reporting from the Central Disaster Safety Headquarters here in Seoul. Let's now go live to Paengmok Harbor on Jin-do Island, just 20 kilometers from the site of the search and rescue mission, where our Kwon So-a is standing by. So-a, as it approaches nightfall once again, how is the situation there developing?
Yes, Yoo-sun. Although the weather conditions have improved a lot during the last couple of hours with the rain and the fog all letting up, now it is the darkness that has become an issue, especially for the rescuers out in the sea. Every hour, every minute is crucial for them. Now, compared to early in the morning, Paengmok Harbor has filled up with more people. Ambulances are lined up, as well as policemen and broadcasters from across the country, and the international media is here as well. Now, the families at the harbor are watching how the rescue process is proceeding here.
Another day has passed with no survivors found. How are the families coping with the situation?
Well, it's sad to say, but as the hours are passing by, hope as well seems to be fading, as the family saw how the helicopters have moved the bodies of the dead bodies here to the harbor, to where a temporary morgue has been set up. Now, they are crying in pain, praying for their loved ones to come back, but also shouting in frustration and anger towards the government about the slow progress of the rescue operations, and also showing anger towards the media covering this event.
And So-a, is there any talk about what may happen after the search for survivors ends? What's the next step going to be for the rescue operations?
Well, it looks like discussions will continue on how and when the Sewol-ho ferry will eventually be pulled up. Now, 4 cranes have earlier arrived here at the harbor, and as well as a floating dock will also be included in the process, which will push things forward. But experts say the process could take months. Now, families worry that as soon as the cranes are used and the ferry shifts, that it could harm possible survivors, which means the families are still holding on to a last piece of hope. Now, that's all I have for now, but I'll be back with more later on. Back to you, Yusun, in the studio.
All right, thank you, So-a. That was our Kwon So-a reporting live on the situation at the Paengmok Harbor on Jin-do Island. And since the Sewol-ho ferry sinking, families of the missing have camped out at an indoor auditorium on Jin-do Island to get the latest information on the rescue efforts and to witness them firsthand. But many are trying their best not to lose hope as the ferry sinks deeper into the cold ocean. Let's go to our Yu Lian, who is standing by at the gymnasium with the families. Lian, how are things looking there?
Hi, Yusan. We've actually received some shocking news just about 2 hours ago. The vice principal of Paengmok High School is believed to have committed suicide. The 52-year-old was found hanged by his own belt from a tree on a hill behind the Jin-do Auditorium at around 5 minutes past 4 p.m. Korea time, according to the local police here. But we can't be sure yet if it was suicide. Investigations are ongoing. Now, the vice principal was on board when the ferry was sinking 2 nights ago, and he was one of the few that were rescued. Ever since the rescue, the police say he has been putting the blame on himself.
And how are the people there reacting to the news, and how have all the families of the victims been doing amid all the conflicting reports today about the rescue operation?
Well, the teachers of Paengmok High School that were here at the gym broke into tears when they heard about the news of the vice principal. Now, as for the families, the sounds of wailing and crying are getting every louder as we get deeper into the night. Parents overcome with grief and distraught that not a single victim has been found alive yet. I see a lot of the relatives of the victims surrounding the officials of the Coast Guard here demanding to know the specific details of the rescue process, and also calling for a more rigorous and more thorough rescue operation. Frustrations here are growing as they are only left to hear news on the rising death toll. Now, earlier today, the head of the victims' families here issued a plea statement which was broadcast nationwide, asking people across the country to help them rescue their children. Families here are feeling they need all the help they can get as they have doubts that the government is trying its best. Many here simply look just tired and exhausted, and the atmosphere is just really grim. Yusan?
All right, Lian, thank you for that report. That was our Yu Lian reporting from Jin-do Indoor Auditorium, where many of the family members of the now 268 missing are gathered. Well, as we said, many questions still remain about the delay in the search and rescue efforts and the captain and crew's actions following the ship's capsize. In trying to better understand the incident, we have Captain John Noble, Director of UK-based Constellation Marine Services, on the phone. Captain, thank you for connecting with us.
Good evening.
Well, rescue divers attempted to enter the ferry earlier today, but to no avail. The delay has left families of the missing frustrated and restless. From your own experience, how do you assess the level of the ongoing efforts?
Well, I think the level of the ongoing efforts are very much controlled by the conditions at the site. The first thing is the current, and that is quite strong. So free diving in the water is very difficult. The second thing is the sea temperature, and the third thing is the weather. The wind which creates waves which make it virtually impossible to get in the water. So all these divers sitting there are actually, they're helpless. They would dearly, I'm quite sure, love to get in the water and get on with it, but we have a tragic situation which could be made worse by putting divers or other rescuers into the water where they too could suffer.
Well, the vessel is now submerged underwater. How viable is it at this point to increase the chance of finding survivors by pumping air into the sunken ship?
Well, if anyone has reached an air bubble, then the introduction of more air can only help, but whether it would go to the right place remains to be seen. If people are trapped in the water, I'm afraid, and it's dreadful for the families, the chances of survival are practically zero because the sea temperature is so cold at 12 degrees that hypothermia would set in relatively quickly. And I regret to say survival is unlikely.
And Korea's Coast Guard earlier said the sunken vessel, now presumably weighing some 100,000 tons with seawater, is slowly pushing down further into the seabed. Other than attaching airbags to it, what other ways are there to bring the ferry back to the surface?
Well, the natural weight of the ship will force it into the seabed if it is standing to a degree. But airbags would be, they're not of sufficient strength. What they can do, they can bring cranes in. There are cranes available not that far away that could probably lift the underwater weight of the hull is not that much. The 100,000 tons is the figure of the volume of water that they estimate might be there. I think that's a bit high, but the weight to be lifted by cranes is not insurmountable. Another technique that they might want to use is get some barges alongside where they fill them with water, put wires under the ferry, and then pump the ballast out of the barges to try and lift the ferry off the seabed. So it is possible.
And before we let you go, Captain, authorities earlier confirmed that the ferry's young third mate and not the captain of the ship was steering the vessel when it encountered trouble, which is a violation of regulations. Should this be seen as just an act of negligence, or could there be a reasonable explanation for this?
Well, both. The question of the third mate being on the bridge and in control of the ship, that would be quite normal in a normal passage. He would be a watchkeeper and he would know the route. However, if the visibility was poor, or if there was something wrong on the bridge that we haven't heard about yet, then he would be obliged to call the captain to the bridge, and that's where the regulations might kick in, and the captain would then assume control. But we don't yet know enough to determine if the ship was off course and who actually was in charge. This investigation has some way to go yet.
All right, Captain, thank you for sharing your insights with us tonight.
Thank you.
And with further details, we're joined by Park Ji-won with us here in the studio. Ji-won, an investigation on what caused a ferry to cause it to capsize was revealed. Can you tell us more details about that?
Yes, the investigation team summoned the captain once again for the third time for questionings, and they decided to file an arrest warrant just about less than an hour ago on charges of manslaughter. They also filed arrest warrants for 2 other crew members on the same charges. Earlier in the day, prosecutors raided offices of the ferry operator, Cheonghae-jin Marine, to find more evidence. They are also looking into whether excessive renovations of the ship may have been a factor. And as you can see from this image, that the ship's weight, the ship went through the renovation in 2012. And the ship's weight increased by nearly 1,000 tons, and the number of passengers the ship can carry also increased by more than 100. Experts say this might have played a factor that the ship listing so easily when taking a sharp turn. The investigation team also raided a shipyard in Mokpo that renovated the ferry. And experts also point out that the factor of cargo carried inside the ferry, hundreds of vehicles and 1,000 tons of other cargo, may have not been tied down tightly, that they could have slid to one side abruptly when ship took a swift turn. So Yusan, now it seems like a combination of so many problems.
Right, and there are other complications as well. The lifeboats on the ship were not deployed because they were chained to the vessel at the time.
Right, reports are saying that these lifeboats were tied so tightly to the boat, and the chains could not be broken with bare hands. Also, the fact that the operator, Cheonghae Marine, suffered a significant deficit in annual revenues last year. And they say they could also have been another factor because they try to operate when they shouldn't have because they wanted to earn more revenues. But we are not sure about it, and investigations are going on.
And the team in charge of investigating this disaster held a press briefing earlier today down in Mokpo. What can you tell us about that?
The joint team announced their interim reports this morning, and it's been confirmed that the ferry's 26-year-old third mate, not the captain, was steering the 6,800-ton ferry when the vessel encountered trouble, which started working for this company in December, just 4 or 5 months ago. And Korean regulations mandate that a vessel more than 3,000 tons should be navigated by a first or second mate, not the third mate. And considering that the Sewol-ho ferry weighs more than twice that, it's clear violation of regulations. And fingers are being pointed toward the captain, who is believed to have been away from the steering room at the time of the incident. However, regarding the exact location of the captain at the time of the crisis, testimonies have been so far differed.
All right, meantime, right, and Chiwon, please do keep us updated on the next newscast. Thank you. The salvage cranes that will lift the Sewol-ho ferry up from where it sits have arrived at the scene a little earlier than expected, as our So-a told us earlier in the newscast. But it could take up to 2 months to get the 6,800-ton ferry to shore, and authorities aren't yet sure when the lift will start. Our Song Ji-sun has the details.
4 years ago, when the Korean warship Cheonan was sunk, it took 1 month to lift it from the ocean floor, and it weighed just 1/5 of what the Sewol-ho does. The passenger ferry, at more than 6,800 tons, is one of the largest operating in the nation. 180 vehicles and cargo weighing 1,200 tons were on board when the ferry departed Tuesday evening local time. Add that to the water that has since inundated the ferry, the total weight that the cranes will have to lift easily exceeds 10,000 tons. 4 cranes with capacity of 10,000 tons combined have approached near the waters of the sunken site and are on standby. But the government says the lift will not be carried out without the consent of families of the missing, as shifting the vessel could jeopardize the safety of possible survivors who at this point would have to rely on air pockets to stay alive. The ferry must be turned upright first in order to be lifted, to minimize further damage and to stabilize the lifting process. Divers will fasten cable wires underwater to the vessel to lift it, but authorities say the lack of experience in lifting a vessel of this size, along with fast currents and poor visibility, could delay the process. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
In the background of the main priority of the search and rescue mission, investigators have been looking at what caused the ferry to sink. The Korea Coast Guard had suggested that the most possible cause of the ship capsizing was that the ship veered off course and made an abrupt change of direction. But there are still conflicting reports about whether it actually did. Our Shin Se-min reports.
Speculation remains over whether the ship was actually following its directed path. There are conflicting reports still more than 2 days since the ship started listing. West Regional Headquarters Korea Coast Guard reportedly said the Sewolho is believed to have turned quickly, but added it is still too early to confirm the cause of the sunken ferry. Earlier, the Maritime Police said the ferry diverted slightly from the advised route, although not completely off course. The General Director of the National Maritime Policy Agency said that all ships leaving Incheon Port en route to Jeju Island are advised to go around Pyeongpungdo Island. However, the ship chose a different route closer to shore as a shortcut.
The ferry chose to sail the path away from the advised route, but even then, it isn't considered off course.
The Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries said otherwise. Officials in a report said that the Sewolho ferry was on track and followed the directed seaway. The chief of the Coastal Shipping Division, Kwon Jun-young, said there is no official term for an advisory or recommended route and that data shows the ferry took the path it intended to take. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The world is reaching out to Korea during this very difficult time. U.S. President Barack Obama offered his deep condolences to the victims of the ferry disaster and pledged Washington's full support for the ongoing search and rescue operations during a news conference at the White House Thursday.
Before I begin, I just want to express, on behalf of the American people, our deepest condolences to the Republic of Korea and the families of all those who've seen their loved ones lost when a ferry sank within the last couple of days. As one of our closest allies, our commitment to South Korea is unwavering in good times and in bad, and that's.
Obama added that he will convey this message in person when he visits Korea for a previously planned trip next week. Earlier, the leaders of China, Japan, and Singapore echoed his sentiments, along with Pope Francis, who delivered a message saying he will pray for the victims, their families, and everyone involved in the rescue operation. It's almost inevitable that dramatic moments are caught in film in this day and age of smartphones. Newly released footage shows when the ship first encountered trouble. We have another amateur video from inside the ferry revealing the harrowing moments when water started gushing in. Our Connie Lee has more.
You can see the ferry from afar in the midst of the fog. The ship is listed about 45 degrees. This amateur video, captured about 30 minutes after the ship tipped over, shows the arrival of the first helicopters to rescue passengers on the deck of the boat. Merchant ships and fishing boats also approach the scene. The ferry has now listed even more, and you can see heavy shipping containers shifting on the deck of the boat. Fishing boats speed up closer to the scene in frantic attempts to rescue anyone on board. But the ferry is quickly submerged, with jets of water shooting out as the ship is nearly completely engulfed now. This just in about 2 hours' time. In another video taken on cell phone by one of the passengers shows the harrowing moments the ship started sinking. A passenger yells out that water is rushing in, water is rushing in. Other passenger videos have also been circulating on the internet in the past 2 days, including one that shows passengers clinging onto walls and their lives as the ship was slanted nearly 90 degrees. In the meantime, an announcement rings out on the loudspeakers. It tells passengers not to move and to stay put. And that's exactly what students here in this video are doing. The footage taken by a surviving passenger shows students staying where they are, some laying down with their life vest on inside the ship that is clearly starting to capsize. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
The weather on Jin-do has cleared up, making things a bit easier for the rescue operations. And for details, our Kim Bo-kyung joins us live here in the studio. Bo-kyung, how are the conditions at the accident site?
Well, Yusun, as you mentioned, things are looking a lot better today compared to yesterday, but it's beginning to look a bit foggy over at Jin-do. Foggy skies have led visibility to decrease to about 5.5 kilometers that is, which is about 8 kilometers less than a couple of hours ago. Wind speed and visibility levels are also going down by the hour, so we should all be aware of that. The slowest speed of tidal currents will be at around 10:25 p.m. later tonight, and we will get 4 more opportunities tomorrow at around 5:40 a.m., 11:13 a.m., 5:12 p.m., and 11:13 p.m. But things are not looking so good for tomorrow, with a high speed of winds forecast blowing at around 8 to 12 meters per second. That's all the updates I have for now, but I'll be back with more on the weather at Jin-do soon.
All right, thank you, Bo-kyung. And that's all we have for you at this hour. Stay with us for the latest on the ongoing sunken ferry rescue operation on our next newscast in just about half an hour.